Now I am. Hi, Arunima.
Hi,
Welcome to the
excited.
Science of Influence and Persuasion. Yes, I am very, very excited. I know it's late at night. We shoot these classes late at night because there's so much of disturbance during the day. But yet, we're very excited about bringing these classes to you. We've promised not to introduce ourselves to you today. You can read our names here if you want to, but let's get started with this very exciting topic. I love teaching this topic, as I do with most other topics, but this one is a very nice one, because over the years when I have taught or trained people on this subject, they've seen great returns. Um, on this topic, because so much of the advice here is so valuable for you to get better at influencing people and persuading people. So, first things first, what is influence and persuasion? Influence is the ability to sway a person's thought, opinion, or behavior, right? Another way of looking at the subject of influence is to influence someone is to get a yes from them, or to convince them to do something or to meet your objective, right? So, a good so what are we learning here? We're learning how to influence, we're learning how to persuade, we're learning how to convince, um, and in a way we're learning how to sell our thoughts and ideas to people, right? Now, why is this topic so important? All of y'all know why this topic is so important, but let me just throw some light on it anyway, right? In um, People that are good at influencing others and getting a yes from others have always had better outcomes in their personal and professional lives, right? Whether they were children, whether they're adults, doesn't matter. People that can persuade and get a yes from somebody else have always got better results. As children, those children actually are very, very persuasive. By and large, they're very, very persuasive. But there are some probably children that are a little more persuasive than others, right? And those children, when they convince their parents to get a night out for a party, they're busy having going out and having fun, and the children that unfortunately can't convince their folks to take a night out often are sitting at home, right? When you are in college, if you have a crush on somebody and if you want to go and ask that girl or guy out, if you have the ability to convince them to go out on a date for you, you see a better outcome for yourself, right? So you end up doing that, then you probably need to convince that person someday. If things go well, you need to again persuade the person to marry you, possibly, right? And if that outcome works well, the person says yes, of course, I will go ahead with this marriage. Then you possibly need to convince his or her parents that you guys need to get married. So again, there's persuasion that gets involved there. And in Indian families, often you need to convince the parents, the uncles, the aunts, the grandparents, so many people to convince right there. But again, this skill will come handy to you then. If you manage to do that, then you'd probably end up having kids, and then more or less what every parent tries to do with their child is influence in some way, right? They try to sway the person's thought, opinion, and behavior in positive directions, in desirable directions, is what they try to do. And they convince them to try to study, they convince them to have the right habits, they convince them just for so many things, right? So that's just the personal side of stuff. People that are good at influence and persuading get upgrades at hotels, right? They get the better room at hotels or get upgrades often on airlines. They tend to negotiate better deals with people as well. Now, in your professional life, I can't tell you more about why this thing is so important, right? The ability to influence and persuade. If you are somebody that wants employment, the first thing that you need to do is convince somebody to give you the job that you so desire. And the more senior you go, the interviewing process becomes so much more difficult, that you need to convince not one person but often multiple people, often people at the same time. You need to convince them that you're the right candidate for that job, right? So the more senior you go, that is part of the process. Once you get a job, almost everything that you do there is connected to influence and persuasion, right? So you need to convince your boss to give you an approval on certain projects. You need to often convince your clients or customers that a certain outlook that you have is the right outlook, or a certain project is the right one to them. Of course, if you're in the business of selling, all that you're doing day and night is influencing and convincing people in some way. If you end up becoming a leader of people, more often than not, everything that you do as a leader of people is influence people, influence your team to conduct themselves in the right way, to deal with situations in the right way, to get the results that you desire. So almost everything that you do there is persuasion. If you're an entrepreneur, often you need to convince people to join your company. That's something that you need to do. You need to convince the banks to give you loans. You need to convince your customers to do business with you. So the process of influence and persuasion and convincing people is an absolute a key business skill. And if you don't have this skill, more often than not, you are not going to manage to do very well in your professional life, right? So it's got many advantages, both personally and professionally, and therefore you should get better at this skill, right? And I'm sure you know that by now. Yes, Arunima, you're here. Tell me.
Yes. What's the difference between influence,
Yeah.
forcing someone, and manipulation?
Good question. So, manipulation involves influence and persuasion, but manipulation is
Hmm.
often done stuff that has negative consequences, stuff that is often unethical, stuff that is often immoral, stuff where you persuade people, but you're not using the right means to persuade people, right? Like you're making
Hmm.
false claims towards it, you're giving wrong data, so on and so forth, right? So that is often what is called manipulation, where the means and the end both
Hmm.
are negative, both are
Unethical.
unethical, both are immoral in a way, right? So that's the difference
Hmm.
between two things. But even when you're manipulating somebody, in the end you are influencing and persuading. Just the methods and
Correct.
the end is not right. You asked me three things: influence, manipulation, and there was one more.
Force.
Force, yeah. So often what happens is, where do you see force coming into the picture? If you're a parent of a child, you may not use your influence, but you may use your force to get them to
Hmm.
stay at home. Or you can't force them to study, but you can at least force them to be in a room, contained in a room.
Hmm.
You need to influence them to study. You can't force them to study, but you can force them to sit in a room. And that's why influence is so important, right? While you may think you have forced them into studying, you haven't really done it. You forced them to be in a room. As a boss, often what you'd want to do is influence your people so that they can execute on the results that you want. But sometimes a boss may force their people into doing certain things, and that's not a very good medium and long term plan, because his team will often get annoyed, irritated, and at the first opportunity not want to work with that boss, right? So
Hmm.
Gandhi, I don't get Mahatma Gandhi's exact words, but he said something on the lines of leadership is nothing but influence, right?
Correct.
Because he said back then, 70 years back, he said leadership in the modern world doesn't means strength, right? It doesn't mean force or
Hmm.
strength. Leadership means your ability to influence people. So that's how
Correct.
important it is, and it's a great question to ask right off the bat.
So could you say the difference in enforcing, you're not really giving the other person a choice,
Hmm.
but in influencing, it's almost like you try to show them how the idea is theirs?
Yeah.
Yes.
Whether the idea is there, see, that's one of the ways in which you influence. But what
Mm-hmm.
influence actually means is, influence is your ability to change or sway a person's opinion,
Hmm.
ideas, behavior, beliefs, right? That's what
Correct.
influence is, your ability to get a
Correct.
yes in a certain way. That's what persuasion is. But how do you do that?
Hmm.
That's one of the ways in which you can do that, right?
Correct.
Where you make that team member, client, whoever, feel that it is their idea, right? And very
Right.
often it is their idea, but if you just put it across in that way to them, that this is your idea, it often helps in the process of convincing, persuading, and influencing.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
Makes sense? Yeah. So all important ability, ladies and gentlemen, and the um, in my experience, what I've seen is if people don't have base level communication skills, it's very difficult for them to influence. So in a way, your ability to influence and persuade is a slightly more advanced communication skill that you have, right? Now, how to influence others? We're going to jump right into this. So our entire content for this session is based on Dr. Robert Cialiandi's book, which is called The Six Principles of Influence. Now, a little about this gentleman who I've admired for a very, very, very long time. And if you get the time, ladies and gentlemen, and it's of interest to you, you must read a book which is called The Science and Art of Persuasion, right? We're going to share an image of that book to you. But this is a gentleman that has worked on the subject of influence and is called the godfather of influence because of his work, his scientific research on the psychology of influence. Ciliandi's work is amongst the best resources on how we persuade others and how we are persuaded. And even now, 30 years later, his persuasive techniques are used by marketers, salespeople, leaders across the world to increase conversion of potential customers and for different attributes, right? The principles of influence are applicable across the board, right? So if you get the time, read this fantastic book, which is called The Psychology of Influence. I really like it. And he shares these six principles, right? And the six principles are the principle of authority, reciprocity, commitment and consistency, social proof, scarcity, and liking. All that you need to know about influence are these things. Besides this, of course, we have, and this also has elements of what we've discussed earlier, which we will get into as we go along. But this session is about us explaining these six principles to you, which we expect you to start using in your day to day personal and business life. And I'm sure you're going to see the results of it. So let's start with the first one, which is the principle of authority. Okay, now what does the principle of authority mean? It means the principle says that people get influenced by those who they believe to be a figure of authority, right? Now, who do we consider figures of authority? More often than not, we look in the modern world at people who are subject matter experts as people, and that's not the only one. This is just one of the ones that we consider people who are subject matter experts as figures of authority and people who can demonstrate credibility in some manner, right? We want to see that credibility or reputation that they have. And very often it's done through degrees, certificates, job titles, experience, uniforms, etc., etc. And it's one of the reasons why we trust people, trust doctors, surgeons, lawyers, and uniformed people. And we'll share more about this. Why does this principle work? We trust subject matter experts because we believe they know what they are talking about. As a result, the likelihood of agreeing with them or taking their advice increases. Okay. Now, by the way, these six principles have been researched across the world in every geography, and they work in every geography of the world. These principles have been researched across every age group. Research has been done with them, so their application is very broad and very, very wide. Now, what does this mean? In simple words, this means that if people think that you are a figure of authority, they're more likely to get convinced by you than if they think you are not a figure of authority, right? So coming across, being a figure of authority or coming across as a figure of authority will help you convince people a lot better. Now, this is one example. Okay, it's called the Bickman's. Okay, you don't need to read this. If you want, you can pause it and read this, but I'll just tell you what the essence of this thing is, right? Or let's read it. The Bickman's basic procedure was to ask a passerby on the street to comply with some sort of odd request, like to pick up a discarded paper bag to stand on the other side of the bus stop sign. In half the instances, the requester was a young man dressed in normal street clothes. The rest of the time, he was dressed in a security guard's uniform. Regardless of the type of request, many more people obeyed the requester when he wore the guard's uniform. And why is that? Because very simply, that person came across as a figure of authority in our minds, and we we then say yes to him far more than we would to somebody who's not, right? This is a very good example, but a lot of robberies and a lot of even terrorist attacks, uh, when people are actually when robbers often rob trucks and cars and stuff like that, they often wear a like a policeman's uniform, or the terrorists in the past have worn an army uniform, right, and gone into different territories, because the minute you see that uniform, you look at them as a figure of authority, and anything that they say, you're more convinced by that, and it's a very natural thing because that's been ingrained into our head in some way, right? The uniform is so important as a sign of authority, that even when we are boarding a plane, and if you the pilot more often than not is wearing a very sharp uniform, right? And of course his clothes have got nothing to do with what he does for a living, but just imagine kind of getting on a flight and seeing the pilot standing there with Bermuda shorts, just because you're probably taking a flight to Goa, and he's wearing Bermuda shorts and standing there with a hat, and that's got nothing to do with how he's going to fly the plane. But that would make you scared, right? You wouldn't be too happy when if you saw the pilot with Bermuda shorts, because again, it's a serious job, and we expect the person doing that job to come across as a figure of authority for us. um, yeah, so if you look at most of these ads, and as a matter of fact, Colgate and Sensodyne, for like so many years, they haven't changed the format of their ads, and they use real doctors or actors in uniform in advertisement to promote the credibility of their brand, right? That's what they've been doing for years. And why? Because when it comes to your teeth, or when it comes to these things, you consider dentists as the figure of authority. And if a dentist is saying something, you're likely to take that a lot more seriously than if just an odd person is saying it. Most of your celebrity advertisement is based on the principle of authority. Now, while Amitabh Bachchan may not be a authority on Pepsi, um, he's looked at as a figure of authority, right? Because of his stature, because of his name, because of his reputation. And then when he endorses a certain brand, the customer thinks that, oh, if Amitabh Bachchan is endorsing this brand, koi to quality hogi, right? It'll be of some quality. And that's the reason why just so many celebrities are signed on to endorse brands, because the minute them as figures of authority, even if they've got nothing to do with the brand, if they kind of endorse it, it gives that brand some credibility. It gives that like an aura of authority in a way, because that person is doing it. And in ideal cases, by the way, the best kind of celebrity endorsements is where the people know that that celebrity is actually connected to that brand in some way, which means that if you know Akshay Kumar, and Akshay Kumar is known to have been a martial arts specialist when he was, even now, but when he was younger, and if he's kind of endorsing a martial arts school, people are likely to take that a lot more seriously, because he has some genuine connection with it, right? And he's considered to be a figure of authority there. But even otherwise, celebrity advertisements works on that principle. Yes, Arunima.
I had another example.
Yeah,
This is in the US. I forget the name of the company, but it was founded by a lawyer named Robert Shapiro.
yeah,
And it's a clothing brand, if I'm not
yeah,
wrong.
yeah.
But he's a lawyer and he has no background or
Mm,
any sort of expertise in clothing. So what they did is they made Kim Kardashian a co-founder,
yeah,
and she's kind of the face of the company.
correct.
So again, because you kind of associate her with fashion, and you
Yeah,
can, uh,
yeah,
and that's another way that they're using principle of authority to promote
absolutely.
that
So
particular brand.
it's used, Arunima, all each one of these six principles are used on us so much that every person attending this class is going to connect with it and be like, huh,
Correct.
this is used on me so much all the time in so many ways.
Correct.
I think the next example that we're going to give is certificates, right? Why do you think more often than not, doctors or even lawyers or so many senior people in management, they put up a lot of their certificates on the wall, because the minute they put those certificates up, and even if you're sitting at a doctor's clinic at the reception, and if you look at a whole lot of certificates in the modern world, education is very important. And you being looked upon as a subject matter expert with all those certificates, you'll take the doctor a lot more seriously than if he doesn't have any certificates in his lobby, right? That's one of the ways in which which you are influenced in some way, right? If you go to a person's cabin and if you see a lot of trophies there, you'll have a look at those trophies and you'll be like, okay, and you'll read what those trophies are, and you'll end up taking that person a lot more seriously because of those trophies, because you'll think he's a figure of authority. So just small things like this keep influencing us all the time. Very often you would have wondered, right, that very like you go and possibly tell the customer your stance on a certain issue, and the customer doesn't really agree with that stance, and then your boss or super boss calls that same customer and says more or less the same things. Maybe he puts it across in a slightly better way, but then that customer just agrees to him and says, yeah, yeah, okay, right? And you'll wonder, saying, hey, I said the same thing to him, why didn't he listen to me? Because your boss or super boss, because of his title or because of his designation, is more of a figure of authority in the customer's mind than you are, right? And therefore he's likely to take him a lot more seriously than he is you, right? So this works practically all the time, in every situation. And it's crazy how good these principles are, right? So we looked at uniforms. So that's why lawyers have a certain uniform, doctors have a certain uniform, pilots have a certain uniform, because you want people to immediately look at them, immediately respect them, right? Immediately even identify them. To the extent that even sadhus have a uniform, right? When you look at a sadhu in this kind of an avatar or this kind of a dress code, you're likely to take his spirituality probably slightly more seriously than somebody that was dressed in casual clothes, right? Because you connect this sadhus to a certain way of dressing and looking, and that is for them being a figure of authority. Right now, uh, how to use it, of course, like I said, your title, your designation, your educational background, your years of experience, often gray hair, right? Gray hair makes so much of a difference in so many fields, because the minute you look at somebody with slightly more gray hair, you're likely to take him more seriously, because you think, oh, he's got more experience than probably some young person there. So immediately you're likely to take gray hair a lot more seriously. Yeah. Your attire makes so much of a difference, as we saw. So one thing is wearing a uniform, but the other way in which you come across as a figure of authority often is wearing formal clothes. And all of us know this, and I think we've discussed this in a previous class, that if a person is extremely sharply dressed and is wearing a nice suit and a nice tie, and of course that's one of the subjects that we have in the communication coaching program, grooming for men, grooming for women, right? So that you'll come across as figures of authority. But if you enter a room with the right body language, you enter a room with, dressed very sharply, immediately you're coming across as a figure of authority to that other person, and it will put that other person on the back foot immediately, and you are likely to meet your objective or agenda. Of course, if you talk rubbish, then it doesn't work, but that definitely has a big role in the way whether people take you seriously or not, right? So besides the big man's exercise that you saw, there was another exercise. I don't know where it was conducted, but again, they took two sets of people. They took a set of actors, and in the first experiment, they asked the actors to wear really casual clothes, and talk to 150 200 people, use an excuse and go and ask them for money, and use, I don't remember what excuse it was, and ask them 150 200 people for money, right? 2 3 weeks from then, in a similar geography, again they asked them to go and ask 150 or 200 people for money, but this time the set of actors were dressed in really sharp formal clothes, right? They were wearing suits, they were wearing ties, they were looking really formal. They used the same excuse, asked 150 200 people for money. The money that they collected was, if I'm not mistaken, almost twice or more than twice, right? Same excuse, in the same geography, they asked the same amount of people, not the same people, but the same amount of people, and the money they collected was twice. And they've done this exercise repeatedly to know that it wasn't just one fluke, right? So just the way you dress can make so much of a difference as to how people perceive you, right? And I don't need to tell you that. If you work in a bank, and two people walk into a bank, one person shabbily dressed, another person not shabbily dressed, you're likely to take the person dressed in sharp formals a lot more seriously. If you go to a restaurant for that matter, and you're really sharply and well dressed, they'll take you a lot more seriously. They'll give you a better table at that, right? So I have experienced this so much, and I'll call Arunima to share some of her experiences as well, of the difference between just formal sharp clothes and casual clothes. Like I mentioned in an earlier session, I used to pre-COVID, I used to travel quite a bit, so I used to be at airports all the time, and the staff at the airport would take me a lot more seriously when I wore like sharp formal clothes, and of course I maintained the right body language all the time, and I even spoke in a certain way to them. And the minute I did that, I came across as a figure of authority, and they said yes to most of my requests in that situation. And truth be told, as a student of the subject of communication and influence, I often run my small social experiments myself to see, even if I don't want something, I'll try to convince somebody to get it, right? Just to see, to like upskill myself in it and experiment myself in it. So this would happen at hotels all the time, the same thing, right? So body language, an assertive tone of voice, and what you wear. So if I went to the reception of a hotel, and if I walked really straight, right, if I was wearing formal clothes, if I didn't smile too much, because more often than not you don't expect people, figures of authority, to smile too much, right? So you give them a small smile, and you speak in a certain kind of assertive tone, they swung into action immediately, because they in a way got scared as to who's this person that's come. And I wasn't rude to them in any way, but just doing this kind of sprung them into action, because they thought somebody important had come, versus me not doing that, having casual body language, casual clothes, talking to them casually. That didn't work. And you will find another principle, which is called the principle of liking. So very often when you're with people, you need to take a call between, okay, am I going to exercise the principle of authority more, or am I going to exercise the principle of liking more? Because very often they're at odds with each other, right? And that's a call you're going to have to take sometimes in a split second, as to what you want to do, which one do you want to exercise more. But this principle of authority works all the time. You know that we've spoken a lot about positive body language. You have a whole class on what to do there, right? But the straight back, expansive shoulders, you walk in a certain way. You've seen most leaders that you admire do that. You've seen most people that you say carry themselves well, walk in that straight way, right? They have straight body language, expansive shoulders. When they walk, they carry themselves well. Often we say they have a certain aura that they have, and most aura is often connected to your body language, right? There's no real aura around you. It's the body language that you demonstrate, which you've learned of. If you continue being straight, walking straight, expansive shoulders, neck, like we said, straight, like, and not drooping all the time, if you start doing these things, you will end up having aura. You will come across as a figure of authority. Yes, Aridima.
Just similar to your airport example, I had an
Yeah.
example as well.
Yes.
Often when I go for meetings, because
Yeah.
when we used to go for meetings,
Mm.
I would end up interacting with people who are much older than
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
So I had to dress in a particular way,
Yeah.
and sort of carry myself to not really hide the fact that I'm young, but just to
Yeah.
show that authority that I have as a content
Mhm.
expert. So in fact, I would emphasize on my title. We would use the word senior content manager,
Yeah.
talk about how much experience I have. I would
Yeah.
dress very differently as opposed to I dress at
At
office on
work.
a normal
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah, at work, and the kind of body language you have to carry. So that I had to use to again to show my authority over what I'm talking about, and for them to
Absolutely.
take me seriously, because I would be 10, 20 years younger to the people I'm interacting with.
Absolutely. I can, Arunima, this topic is such a favorite of mine that I can really kind of belt out examples in my own life and just other examples
Correct.
as well, because we've seen this all the time. For me, it struck me the most the importance of wearing sharp clothes, and especially
Mm-hmm.
in our line of business, as we are learning consultants
Correct.
to some of India's and the world's biggest companies that are based out of India. I went for a meeting where we were supposed to make a pitch to a client, right? And this was literally when I first got started with work better. It was my first year, and in a place like Bombay or in a place like India, my thought back then, my immature thought back then, was to say that, oh, we shouldn't be wearing jackets and ties, and it's so hot. Why do we need to do this? Why can't we just wear a shirt and
Mhm.
go for a meeting? So I tried doing that in my first 6 months, and then I was in this reception of this really large company, and I think they had called multiple kind of trainers and training companies to make pitches or have discussions with them. And I looked all around me, and everybody sitting there was so sharply and formally dressed that
Correct.
I looked underdressed for that meeting. Now, you can argue that, oh, but it shouldn't be about the way you should dress. It should be about what's there in your brain. Deal with the world, not how you would like it, but as the world is, right? Although I thought just wearing a shirt and not feeling hot is the right thing to do, while practically that may be the right thing to do. But if you're in serious business engagements and situations, dress according to what is required for that situation, right? So tomorrow, if
Correct.
you run a jewelry shop, or tomorrow if you run a general store, maybe you don't need to be in a suit, right? You look stupid, but you still want to dress well. You still want to represent yourself well, right? Even at a general store, for that matter, if the person sitting at that counter is dressed shabbily, you don't take him as
Correct.
seriously as somebody that's clean, neat, right? And then that the person sitting there kind of is reflecting the shop in a way, right? And even if it's a one man show, so it doesn't matter what you're doing. Dressed formally for that situation in a business situation, and that helps a
Correct.
lot. And the same thing is true with, of course, casual clothes as well, right? So even in your kind of, when you're wearing casual clothes or semi casual clothes, dress well, right? People take you a lot more seriously when you're dressed well, and it's so cheap to dress well now with all these websites and stuff like that, right? So it's not expensive. So the positive body language, go back to that section, go back to that class, learn it again if you want. You know what we've taught you there, and the tone of voice that you use in so many cases, right? Again, you've learned what a assertive tone of voice means, and especially if you want to be taken as a figure of authority, you need to use that assertive tone of voice, which is a mix of being polite yet firm in the way you speak. And that's something which is important. We have a whole class which I hope that you all have, is a part of your pack, which is a class on confidence, right? And if you are not confident as a person, it's very difficult for you to come across as a figure of authority. And we've just shared so many behavioral aspects of how you can become more self confident, which will help you in your communication. I hope you've taken that class. If you've not, please take that class, because without that confidence, it's impossible for you to come across as a figure of authority, right? And of course, like we discussed, that knowledge plays a very, very important part in today's day and age for you to come across as a figure of authority. And very often I tell people, right, that if somebody comes to you and just says that, oh, I'm Dr. If you're Dr. Arunima Kamat, both of Arunima's parents have got PhDs, right, Arunima? So if somebody says they're Dr. Arunima Kamat, there's so much more weightage to that you'll tend to take that person a lot more seriously, right? And they could be a doctor in a totally different field which is not connected to the field that you're talking about. You'll still be taken so much more seriously, because in today's world, your your knowledge is very, very important to people, right? And that degree or that title is a reflection of that. Subject matter expertise is reflected through your knowledge on your products, processes, general knowledge, right? So what means is, again, taking the jewelry shop, since we spoke about it, if you run a jewelry shop, please be an expert on everything related to jewelry, right? You need to know it in and out. You need to know general knowledge. You need to know the latest trends of what's happening. You can't just be stuck in an old era and have information from an old era and not a new era, right? So you need to know all those things for you to come across as a figure of authority in it. Yeah, and just another kind of, your general awareness plays such a big difference, right? In you coming across as a figure of authority, because the minute you have that general awareness, you can like talk about so many things where people start respecting you, right? So this is what the principle of authority means. Very, very important for you to influence people. Yes, Arunima.
I have a question. If you try to show too much authority through, let's say, your titles, not as much your attire really, but your knowledge and just being assertive, could it be sort of misinterpreted as arrogance? Could that be a flip side of it?
See, it's a very good question. Again, I think we partially addressed this in our class on confidence, right? Where we said uh, confidence is good, but sometimes
Mm-hmm.
if it tilts too much in a certain direction, it can go to becoming overconfidence. And again, if it tilts even more, it goes towards being arrogant. So when
Mm.
you overdo just about everything, it's harmful. It's not just this thing. So you're right. If this is overdone, it is not pleasant for the person on the other side. But I think people need to be smart enough to do this in subtle ways. I'll give you an example of it's so easy for me when I go to that airport counter or that hotel, like I told you, right? I'm really tired. I'm entered at 12 o'clock at night and now I'm going there. I want him to take the least amount of time to get my things done. So I want to come
Mm.
across as a figure of authority, but sometimes I could probably come across as aggressive if I overdo that a
Mm.
little, right? Or I could come across as arrogant.
Mm.
So I always need to be careful that I am coming across as a figure of authority, yet not tilting into being arrogant, aggressive, short tempered, none of those things, right? So I need to be very, very
Correct.
conscious about it. And sometimes I have crossed the line and I've made that mistake in a lot of situations. But with experience, you get to know that, okay, this is a line that you can't cross. And with unknowingly I have crossed that line of probably coming across as arrogant or aggressive to the other person on that side, right? So yeah,
Okay.
that is a result of it. Very often when you have good body language, when you carry yourself out, people are naturally kind of intimidated by you in some
Intimidated.
way. And then what happens, any small little thing that you do can come across as arrogant to them. So very
Mm.
often, even if you're not being arrogant, because the other person is intimidated, you could come across as arrogant. But
Correct.
in my experience and opinion, there are all of us need to learn how to practice this thing because it becomes so important in our interactions with other people, right?
Correct.
And then with practice you'll know where to draw that line. Hmm? Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the exercise that you need to do, and you need to, of course, carry this to your live coaching session and share a lot of these things with your coach and have a discussion with him. How has the principle of authority worked on you in the past, right? In any ways, right? How has the principle of authority been used? How can you use this principle in your personal and professional lives, right? So give three examples for the first question, three examples for the second question as to how can you start using it. Of course, pause the video here and write your answers down so that you can take them for your coaching class. Okay, so now that we're done with the principle of authority, let's go to the principle of reciprocity. Right now, what does the principle of reciprocity mean? When you receive something from someone, you feel an obligation to return the favor. This isn't limited to gifts and goods, it also includes treatment. If someone treats you with kindness, you are likely to treat them back in the same way, right? Now, why does this work? We are wired to want to return favors and pay back our debts. People will say yes to you if they feel that they owe you one. This is an age old principle, ladies and gentlemen. I don't even think I need to tell you much about this principle because it's worked on us. It's steeped in our culture also in a way, right? So let me share a few examples of this thing. Um, in Indian tradition, when important functions happen, but especially when a wedding is happening, our parents' generation, if you remember, they would make a note, literally a written note of what each and every person gave them or their sons or daughters as gifts. If it's money, they would write the exact amount down. If it's a gift, they would write that exact gift down, because what they would want to do at some point of time in the future, when probably there was an important function in their family or a wedding in their family, they wanted to return it in equal proportion and probably add rupees 1 or rupees 10 or a little more to that and give it back to them, right? So that you know, give and take was such a strong thing that you got something, you literally made a note of it because you wanted to give it back to them at some point of time, right? So that's how the principle of reciprocity works. It's worked for a very, very long time. Now let me give you another example. If you have a friend or family member that is gone out of their way to do you a favor, right? And they've done something for them, we literally look for ways in which we can return that favor back to them, right? You don't even need to ask for it. You look for ways in which you can return that favor back, because that's how we're wired as human beings. And by the way, 8 out of 10 people behave like that. You'd often have two people that are, I don't know what to call them. Maybe we can call them psychopaths. That don't these rules don't apply to them. They don't care about these things. But most people, 8 out of 10 people, if you do them a favor, they will look for ways in which they can return that favor back to you. Right? That's just the way human beings work. So what do you do here in business and non-business situation? And this is both a good thing from the principle of influence, and also it's a good thing just to do in general, because that's how your network grows, that's how you build great positive relationships. So there's nothing wrong with this. At all points of time, look for ways in which you can help people in business. You can help your family, you can help your friends. Just look for ways in which you can add value, help, give something to people in a way. And when you keep doing that, people will want to automatically give back to you. So you create what is called a win-win situation amongst business associates, family, and friends, right? So that's something that you end up doing. Now let me give you a few examples of reciprocity. The entire business of corporate gifting is based on the principle of reciprocity, right? The entire business is based on that. So why do you send a gift across to a corporate, or to somebody in business? You send a gift across to them because even though they cannot return the business back in the form of even if they can't return the favor back to you in the form of business, at least they will give you a meeting or they'll give you an appointment. Very often you've seen that companies send their dealers and their channel partners for these conferences or these trips abroad, right? And why is it that they do that? Because they know that the minute these channel partners, dealers, distributors go for these trips, in a way, they will want to give them business back, or at least entertain their new products and services, right? Because they've sent them free of cost to a certain place, right? So that's how the reciprocity principle kicks in. An entire corporate gifting business is based on that principle. It's that simple when you do it. um, Now this is a great example. When I was going through this content, I actually took a picture of it and sent it to some of my people to say, listen, you guys need to use this more, this is so wonderful. I sent it to my salespeople. I said an experiment set in a restaurant showed that waiters could increase tips by 3% when bringing a candy along with the bill. This is awesome, right? So 3% just by bringing a candy along with the bill. When waiters allowed patrons to choose two pieces of candy, tips increased by 14%, right? So you actually didn't just give them one, but you gave them a choice. When waiters delivered a piece of candy, walked away, then returned a minute later to gift a second candy to the group because it was such a great table, tips increased by 21%. Isn't this incredible? And there's just so much of data around this thing, right? Let me share another example with you. First, an example connected to waiters. You know that if you go to a restaurant and a waiter gives you great service and treats you extremely well, the likelihood of him getting a bigger tip goes up, right? Because all of us know that the likelihood of him getting a bigger tip grows up. And yet all the waiters on this planet know this, and yet there are so many waiters that don't treat you well, right? How stupid are they? How lazy are they to do that, right? And that's just a wrong way of functioning, because the minute you give great service, you want to reciprocate that with a gift. Very often when you go the extra mile for your customers, Your customers will try to pay you back. What does going the extra mile mean? When you do something extra for your customers, right? When you go beyond the obvious and do something for your customers, the customers will try to return that favor in multiple ways, right? They'll try to return the favor by giving you more business. They'll try to return the favor by giving you a reference. They'll try to return the favor by sending you an appreciation email or saying something kind about you. They'll try to return the favor by forgiving you when you do something wrong in the future, right? So these are the three or four ways in which customers, when you go the extra mile for them, they want to do something back for you. And these are the four ways in which they try to do it: give you more business, give you a reference, send you appreciation emails, or put something up on the internet which is kind about you, or forgive you in the future when you do something wrong, right? So again, you'll see the principle of reciprocity plain. Now, my favorite example, and I can literally run this entire class based on just taking the example of who the people that are absolute pros of influence and persuasion, which is the guy that's a sari salesperson, or the guy running sari shops. These guys are the pros of influence and persuasion, and they've learned all of this thing not through trainings like this, but just sheer experience of doing it every day. So if you go to one of these sari shops, you know how they try to kick in the principle of reciprocity? They try to do it in two ways, right? And I think that example is later, but I'll share that with you right now anyway. So they try to do it in two ways. So the first way that they'll try to kick in the principle of reciprocity, as soon as you come in, they'll say, "Sir, क्या लोगे आप खाने के लिए?" You say, "No, no, no, nothing." "Sir, कुछ तो ले लो." You say, "नहीं, नहीं, नहीं, sir, कुछ तो पीना ही पड़ेगा आप आ गए तो," right? So they'll give you some tea, coffee. They'll ask you whether you want a soft drink, a cold drink. They'll often give you a samosa. They'll try to give you something to eat, because each one of us knows that the minute we take that the teacup, and we put it to our lips and drink a little bit of tea or coffee or eat that samosa, automatically there is some pressure that is built up on us to kind of buy something after that, right? So that's one thing that they do. The other thing that they do to kick in the principle of reciprocity is, very often you'll say, um, nikalna mat, because you're not sure whether you want to buy it. So you tell them, "Oh, you don't need to remove it. Don't take the effort to do it." And he'll say to you more often than not, you say, "Don't worry, it's my job to do that. I'll show you everything properly," right? So what he's kicking in the principle of reciprocity by saying, "Don't worry, I'm going to go out of my way for you. I'll do whatever it is for you," and then you feel the pressure to in turn buy this, right? So he combines these two things, action that he takes for the principle of reciprocity to kick in, and again, works like magic when that happens. In 1974, this is a long time back, sociologist Phillips, I don't know his second name, sent Christmas cards to around 600 strangers. Despite not knowing him at all, over 200 of those people sent return cards back to Kuntz, I think his name is. Why did so many people reply to a complete stranger, right? I wonder whether people would do that today, 30, 35 years down the line. But this is like great research on this subject, right? My favorite sari salesman, all of us have been here, and what a good job they do, right? So I just shared these examples with you, and they are real pros. You'll find all salespeople being real pros at this, right? Now, how to use it, we've already discussed this, but offer something first. Allow the other person to feel indebted to you, right? Don't do this in a bad, conniving, manipulating way. You don't need to do it in that way, right? Because if you just do it in a kind way, I'll tell you how this works so brilliantly in every relationship, right? We could go on. If I'm a good boss and you come to me, and if you say, "Listen, I need this emergency leave, but can you please give it to me?" And there's lots of work which is there, but you say, "I really need it." Now, it's going to be a tough couple of days for me to handle the entire situation, because you're taking this emergency leave. But if I say yes to you and I give you that emergency leave, 8 out of 10 team members would then say, my boss really helped me out when I needed him. So now when he needs me, I'm going to be there for him. Right? So that's how 8 out of 10 people would operate. So it makes sense for you to kind of help your subordinate or team member by giving him that leave when he wants to, because that creates the principle of reciprocity. If you have team members and you go out of, if one of your team members needs help and you proactively go to him and offer that help and help him out, 8 out of 10 times when you need help in return, you can go back to that person and he will help you out in some way, right? So where possible, try to help your subordinate. Where possible, try to help your boss. Where possible, try to help your customer. Where possible, try to help your colleague. It's both a nice thing to do, and you can also use the principle of influence and persuasion when you need them, right? Give something that is obviously and exclusively for the benefit of the other person, right? Even small things like, if you have a customer and if you come across an article, you're reading an article on Economic Times and you come across something that you think can help that person or that customer, and if you send that link across to them saying, hey, I read this article and I thought it would be really useful for you, and you just send that across, it doesn't cost anything for you. The minute you do that, the principle of reciprocity starts kicking in, right? Like, he's like, oh, wow, this guy really thought about me and sent this article, now let me try to do something in return when I can to this person. We shared, of course, going the extra mile. Don't make your intent obvious. So this basically means don't do it in a way where you make it obvious that you're trying to do this because you want something in return later, right? That's not the right way to do it. You need to keep trying to give where possible. And when we talk about giving, right, it doesn't mean that somebody will ask you for money and you empty your bank account and give it to him saying reciprocity baad mein aayega. We're not talking about stupid ways in which to give it, right? We're not talking about doing something for a colleague who never appreciates it, or who's never going to care to return the favor at any point of time. You don't want to go out of the way for people like that. So while using these principles, of course, you need to use your common sense and can't let people take you for a ride, right? And of course, make sure that they know it's from you. Okay, so our exercise which you need to take back to your coaching class: how has the principle of reciprocity worked on you in the past? Three examples there. How can you use this principle in your personal or professional life? Right? I can share one thing with you. I have a now almost three, no, yeah, almost 3 year old child. He's 2 months short of 3 months short of being three, and literally all interactions with him in a way is give and take, a negotiation or reciprocity, right? Literally all negotiations with him, where you say, okay, I'll give you a kiss, but then what I want in return is that, right? So it's that give and take that is there, and it's cute when they're kids, but it's so wired in us that that's the way we want to do it, right? And even if we want something, we're like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna do this for you, so that means that later on you probably need to do this for me in sometimes obvious ways because he's 2.5 3 years old, and sometimes in non-obvious ways, right? Yes, Arunima, tell me.
So I thought I'd share my examples
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
So one, I thought of one personal and one professional. Now, because I live alone, my parents don't live with me. I would have neighbors who would help me out.
Yeah,
So they would like give me food, or if I got locked out, they would kind of let me stay at their place, something along those lines. So because they would help me out, I would automatically, like you said, I feel then the need to help them out when they
yeah,
need, and even if it's for the smallest thing, if they want me to sign a parcel for them, if they want
yeah.
me to sort of look after their child for a couple of hours, I do it because I know they helped me, and for me that
Correct,
was a big deal.
correct.
So that's how it sort of worked on me as well. And of course,
And
they didn't do it
almost
from.
correct, and almost every person that we know operates, I wouldn't say every person, but at least 8 out of 10 people operate like that, right?
Correct.
Yeah, go
Correct.
on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the second, the professional example is when I was working with a client, and this is a client I was working with for a long time.
Yeah,
There would be certain months or weeks where we'd go the extra mile for this client. So
yeah,
stay up, work overnight, deliver, and try to over deliver.
yeah,
So that helped it later on. I think towards the end of the project, when we needed extensions on
yeah,
deadlines,
yeah.
we could very easily ask them, and they didn't have a problem because
Absolutely.
again we had kind of gone the extra mile for them earlier, so they were
Yeah,
okay extending the deadline for us by a week.
yeah, yeah.
So that is how we then ended up using it
Correct.
to our benefit.
So, and it's so wonderful. I love this principle because it genuinely creates a win-win situation. It genuinely creates
Correct.
partnerships amongst neighbors, between clients and businesses, so between team members, between a boss and subordinate, right? But of course, if you keep waiting for somebody else to do something for you first, that's a wrong way in which to operate in your business and your
Correct.
personal life, right? Be the first to go out and add value to somebody else, help somebody else, be there, and that's just wonderful, right? In a way.
Correct.
Yeah, cool. Okay, the third principle. This one you need to pay slightly more attention, because if you don't pay attention to this one, you could get a little confused on what this means. So the third principle is the principle of commitment and consistency. Now, even this principle, which I'm telling you is slightly more complex than the other ones, the sari shop salesman uses it like a pro without going through any of these workshops or without reading the book. Right now, what does the principle of commitment and consistency mean? It means if you get someone to commit verbally or in writing to something, they are likely to go through with it. So, what it means is, okay, in simple words, okay, let me read out this slide first and then I'll try to explain it to you in simple words, right? Although this is simple enough here on the slide itself. Why does it work? Psychologists have long recognized that most people have the desire to seem consistent with their words, beliefs, attitudes, and deeds. This tendency comes from two sources. Number one, it is valued by society, and number two, it reduces complexity of decision making. One simply has to recall an earlier decision and stick by it. Now, what does this mean in very simple words? And I'll give you two or three examples of how it's used. Um, we as human beings like being consistent with what we have said or thought of earlier, right? I'll repeat this. We as human beings like to be consistent with what we have said or thought of earlier, because if we don't come across as being consistent with what we've thought and said earlier, people often look at us with a certain amount of suspicion, with a certain amount of doubt, and they can't take that person that seriously. This does not mean that you have a stupid opinion and you stick to it, although most people tend to do that because it becomes even an ego problem for them to admit that they were wrong in their earlier opinion, right? But to repeat, the principle of commitment and consistency means that you are likely to go ahead with something if you've given a commitment either verbally or in writing to someone, right? Now, you know who are the experts at using this principle? Children are the experts of using this principle. And I explain how they do it, right? So your child will probably come to you, or you've probably done that as a child, where you've gone to your father or mother and you said, okay, you know what, I want to go and play in the park, or I want to go for a movie, I want to go to the mall, right? That's what your child said to you, and you are really tired. So you tell your child saying, you know what, beta, I'm really tired today, but let's go next week, right? Let's go next week to the mall. So they're disappointed, but they say, okay, right? The next week, when your child comes to you, he will bring up the previous week where he'll say, Papa or Mama, last week you said that we will go to the mall. Come on, now let's go to the mall. And them saying that to you, where they say that, oh, last week you promised me that we will go, that puts so much of additional pressure on you to actually now take them to the mall, right? Them just saying that one line, where what have they done? They've said, be consistent with what you said earlier. You said we'll go to the mall next week. Now next week has come. Now be consistent with that. Don't be the kind of person that's not consistent with that, right? Now, for some reason, if you manage to get away with that week and it goes to now, first week you said no, second week you said no, it's gone to the third week, right? And you say, okay, next week pakka we'll go. Your child will definitely come to you that weekend and say, Dad, for the past 2 weekends you've been telling me that we're going to go to the mall, we have to go to the mall today, right? And then come whatever the commitment it is, you'll say, yeah, yeah, come on, I'm going to put everything aside, because 2 weeks in a row I can't be seen by my child as not sticking to the commitment that I've given and not being consistent with what I've said earlier, right? So children use this principle like magic. Okay, They use this principle like magic on you, and that's what the principle means. Now, this is, of course, a very, very nice example. I'm going to read it out for you. In one famous set of studies, researchers found, rather unsurprisingly, that very few people would be willing to erect a wooden board on their front lawn to support a drive safely campaign in their neighborhood. Okay, this is an example from the US. However, in similar neighborhoods close by, four times as many homeowners indicated that they would be willing to erect this unsightly billboard, right? A big billboard on their lawn. Why? Because 10 days previously, they had agreed to place a small postcard in their front window of their homes that signaled their support for a drive safety campaign. That small card was the initial commitment that led to a 400% increase in a much bigger but still consistent change, right? So very simply what they did is, they went to this neighborhood, and 10 days back they gave them very small signs that they could put up saying drive safely, right? And then they went in 10 days and they said, now could you also put this big board in your garden saying that drive safely, so everybody can see it. And so many more people were willing to do that because they had initially committed to this act, right? There's another example on voting, which is so damn interesting. Now, I don't remember the exact figures, but in one constituency, they looked at what the average constituency, or one small little part of that constituency, they looked at what the average polling numbers were of that constituency, right? Which means how many people from there actually went in and voted, and they looked at what the average was there. So then they ran an experiment with in that constituency, where 1 week or 10 days prior to the voting day, they went and they actually got signatures from people, where people just signed and said that they will go out and vote this year, right? They just got that signature. That not signature didn't mean anything. They knew it wasn't a government organization, but just doing that one thing increased the amount of people going and voting, if I'm not mistaken, by some 10 or 15%. Just one small act of getting a signature 10 days prior, 10-15% more people went in and voted, right? Because the minute you give a commitment to something, you're much likely to go ahead and stick to that commitment than than you won't, right? Now, the sari salesman does it in, so how to use this, use the person's self label. Now this is where the sari salesman does this so brilliantly, and I'll give you two examples of how he gets you to be consistent with a label that he gives you. Okay, now I'll share one example that actually happened to me, and another example that they typically do with people, right? So, and I was actually sari shopping because it was my cousin's wedding. So we were in Bombay. My family is from Goa, so that they came to Bombay and we went sari shopping. So when we were at the shop, of course, he identified me as the brother of the bride, and for some reason, I was gifted a Rado watch, which is an expensive brand. Of course, I wouldn't buy it myself ever, but I was gifted this watch. So I was wearing this like really expensive watch, and that sari salesman, in a subtle way, brought it to my notice that I was wearing a Rado watch in front of my family. And the subtle message that he was trying to give me is, hey, listen, when you want to buy something for yourself, you buy really expensive stuff. So now when you're buying the saris, ensure that you buy an expensive sari, right? So he identified my watch and like said that aloud in front of my family in a way they could hear me. So automatically in my head, that happened, right? Now, the non-subtle ways in which the sari salesman does it, where he uses a person's self-label, is he'll say to the kind of father of the bride, probably he'll say that, sir, I'm sure for your daughter's wedding, you're not going to spare a few thousand rupees for your daughter's wedding sari, right? You're not going to spare it. So what has he done? He's increased the image of the bride's father. He's increased the image himself, and now he's telling you, okay, now be consistent with this image that I have laid out for you, right? Of you're not somebody that will cringe to spend a few more thousand rupees on your daughter's wedding sari, right? So now come on, go and meet this self label that I've given you. And very often salespeople who are experienced and do their jobs well know all of these things, right? Um, uh, when they're talking to their customers, typically they'll say, I'll say this in Hindi and English. So they'll say, "Sir, aap to jante ho." So the minute they say "aap to jante ho" and they'll say certain things, even if the person on the other side doesn't know anything about it, he typically nods his head, because the other person, when he says "aap to jante ho," it's like he's like, "Oh, I'm expecting you to know this information already." And then the other person acts like he knows that information already, although he has no clue about it, right? Because the salesperson has given him a certain image, and now he's trying to be consistent with that image that, oh, I know that knowledge already, right? So these principles are used on you all the time by different people, right? So somebody will say to you, "Sir, I'm sure you're the kind of person that is very serious about their investments and their savings." And you'll just nod your head even if you're not, because now he's created kind of this image of you of saying, oh, you're somebody that takes savings and investments seriously. And then he'll probably try to pitch some investment product to you, right? And then that'll likely to convince you, because now you want to be consistent with that image. Now, by the way, none of these principles that we're going to discuss with you work 100%. None of them work all the time. None of them work with all 7 billion people on the planet. What these principles do is they increase your likelihood of getting a yes from somebody. They increase the likelihood of you convincing somebody, swaying a person's opinion. But don't think that it's going to work 100% of the time with all the people, right? That doesn't happen. Now, the other way in which you can use the principle is get the person to make a small commitment. Like we just discussed in the previous session, the minute a person makes a small commitment to something, automatically then he feels compelled to kind of make the bigger commitment, right? And use the foot in door technique. Determine an appropriate sales small request, something that the person is capable of doing and possibly willing to do, and then move on to the bigger request which is there, right? So this is again training that we give salespeople all the time when they lose business, right? When they lose business, say you are speaking to a certain customer and you've lost that business to your competitor. All that you need to do in that situation is to say, okay, Mr. Customer, I know that I've lost my business to this competitor. I'm feeling really bad about it. The next time, if I give you a proposal which is good enough, will you give me business? And at that point of time, he wants to say that he wants to get you off his back. So he says, hey, I'll give you the business. He says, are you sure you're going to give me the business? And he'll say, yeah, yeah, yeah. The next time that you go to him, all that you need to say to him is, sir, remember the last time you gave the business to my competitor and you told me that this time you'd give the business to me, right? Just saying that to that person will make him want to be consistent with what you said, and it will increase the chances of you getting that business from them, right? And what did you do? You got a commitment from him earlier, right? You got a commitment from him earlier verbally. If you can get it in writing, even better. But you got that commitment from him verbally. If you can get it over WhatsApp, oh, that's even more golden, right? Because you have something in writing as well to tell him. And again, that increases your chances later on. um, yeah, so I think this is how the principle of commitment and consistency works. Yes, Arunima, do you have any questions? So the exercises here are the same, right? So how has the principle of commitment and consistency worked on you in the past? I'm sure if you have children, it's worked with you. I'm sure if you have a spouse, it's worked on you, right? Your partners and spouses are very good at saying, hey, but you said that in the past. Now be consistent with that. And how can you start using this principle to your benefit in your personal and professional life? Yes, Arunima.
No, I don't have any questions. I do have an example of something I do.
Yeah,
It's a bit of a funny example. So I have a friend, and because of our work schedules, we don't get to talk a lot.
yeah,
So often I text this friend and say that we need to talk on so and so date, and if I can get her availability on that date, I kind of key it in into our calendar and I send a screenshot. And I
yeah.
told her, all right, you said it, and it's in my calendar now. So it's almost like I'm holding her to it. So when the day finally comes, I send her the screenshot of the reminder saying that, okay, listen, you promised me that we were supposed to talk today.
Arunima, I have
And
a
more
feeling
often
your
than not,
friend
that
doesn't.
works.
Sorry, I have a feeling your friend doesn't like you too much if you have to do all these things. Okay, but again,
So, yeah,
taking from your example and sharing a business one, right? So the way you're supposed to follow up, if you want, say, your payments to come in, or if you want anything,
correct,
a good way to follow up is to say that, hi, sir, I'm calling with regards to this payment. And they'll say, yeah, I'll give it to you, I'll give it to you in a while. So you say, okay, sir, can you give me a specific date? Say, next week I'll give it to you. So try to get again more specific. You say, okay, today is
correct.
a Wednesday, so can I get the payment by Monday? And they say, yeah, Monday. So Monday is the 15th of October. Can I, are you sure I can get? They say, yeah. And then if you send a mail after that saying that, hi, as discussed,
Correct.
it's supposed to get our payment by Monday, the 15th of October. If you do that, the chances of him sticking to that are a lot more because he's verbally giving you a commitment. So you got a small foot in the door in a way there, right? Where he's given you that commitment, and then later on you can actually get that payment. And this works like magic. Doesn't work every time,
Correct.
doesn't work all the time, but God, does it work a lot better. So if you don't know how to follow up for payments with your bosses, with your subordinates, you can't influence them unless you know this principle well. And the more specific you make the commitment, the better the chance of actually getting it from them.
This is, since you mentioned that example, it's also something I employ internally
Yeah,
when I interact with some of my colleagues. Is again when we discuss that something has to be done by a certain time, we shoot out emails, and again to make it public
yeah,
and to make just keep ensure the person's accountable to the
yeah,
commitment that they've made.
yeah.
We mark certain stakeholders also. So again, it's a public sort of commitment made,
Correct.
and now it's difficult for that person to go back on it, and helps us ensure we meet deadlines.
Correct. So
So that's another way we use it.
a lot of us, it's so nice that you brought this point up. A lot of y'all attending this class would be like, hey, I do that too. And what tends to happen is with experience, you learn certain things that you may be doing it practically without knowing the theory of it. And the minute you know the theory of it, you can do these things more consciously and more consistently. So you may
Correct.
be doing a lot of these things already, but this session is going to help you do it consciously and consistently, and that is where the added magic is going to happen if you're going to do it already. And you may be doing it in certain situations but not doing it in certain other situations. Your kids may be doing it with you, but you may not be doing it with your kids that much, right? Because your kids have realized how to persuade you. So that's the way to go about doing it. And I hope you've understood this. Get a small commitment, like, okay, give me the commitment first of telling me which week, then give me the commitment of which exact date, and then I'm going to ask you for something bigger after that, right? So that's the way you can do it. Now, the fourth principle is the principle of social proof. What does this mean? This works on us all the time, used by people all the time on us. This principle relies on our sense of safety in numbers. People decide what to believe and how to act in a situation by looking at others, what others are doing. Why does it work? Especially when they are uncertain, people will look to the actions and behaviors of others to determine their own. Acting according to what most people are doing proves as a shortcut in believing that the decision will be right. I can give you tons of examples and I'm sure you're going to enjoy them. If you have ever traveled by a train in India, the waiter there has done it to you, right? If you travel by a train in India, after you finish your meal, the waiters often in the train will come with a tray with sauce on it, probably some sweets on it, and that tray has notes on it. Now, these are tips, right? And often the notes that you will see on the tray, the ones which will be most obviously kept there, will be slightly larger notes, larger amount notes. So there'll be some 50s, 100s, 20s, 10s. You'll hardly see any coins, right? Because when they're going by for the tip, and you look at somebody else that's kind of put 50 rupees, it puts pressure on you to at least put 20 or 30, right? Because you see, oh, somebody else is given a note of 50, and that's why they'll do that on purpose, and they'll get the tray out, because that's how social proof works. You feel everybody is doing it, so therefore I should do it as well, right? So that's social proof that the waiters at the Indian Railway are applying on you all the time, right? Now, sari sales people are experts at doing this again, right? So they'll ask you more often than not, they'll question you and they'll say, oh, so where are you from? And you will say, oh, I'm from Goa. Oh, what's your name? They'll say, oh, you're a Kamat. Oh, you're a Kamat. Oh, you got no idea. In the last week alone, we had some two other families from Goa that came and did their shopping here, right? So they'll try to say, oh, everybody from Goa, when they come to Bombay, they shop here. So that's social proof in a way. You've seen movies do this more often than not, right? A movie's just been released 3 days back, and there'll already be some success party on Bombay Times, or they'll release some ad on the newspaper saying super hit, and they'll put some trailers on the TV saying super hit, right? So they're giving you an impression that, oh, tons of people are going for this movie, even you should go for it. 100 crores, tons of people are going, and so more and more and more people keep going, right? Because they feel like social proof. Everybody is going for it. Everybody's liking it. I should do it too. Real estate brokers do that with you all the time, right? So if you want to rent out an apartment or buy an apartment, again, they'll do the same sari salesman trick with you, where they'll say, oh, so where are you from? You're from Kamat, Goa. We have three families from Goa in this building, right? So already you go on the back foot saying, yeah, three families in the building. Your kids use this on you all the time without even realizing. So if they want something, if they want a mobile phone, they will say, everybody, all the kids in the colony on the same age have a mobile phone, only I don't have it. And then at least that gets you to think, right? That gets you to think in terms of saying, should he get a mobile phone? Does all his companions and all his friends actually have mobile phones? But it will put a little bit of pressure on you, right? It'll get you to think at least. And the kids do it to you all the time. Oh, everybody has this thing, all the people in my group have it, only I don't have it, right? I would do that to my parents all the time if I had to convince them, right? So that's what safety in numbers means. Amazon, Flipkart, they are using this they are using this on you all the time, where they'll say, oh, we've got the number one website, right? So when they call it the number one website, they're also projecting authority, and they're saying, okay, we have millions of sellers and buyers that come, so many of them in their ads. For example, if you've seen the Amazon ads, they will show different kinds of people all across India buying products from Amazon, right? Because they want to give you an impression that everybody is buying, whether you're Punjabi, Bengali, Gujarati, Goan, Maharashtrian, doesn't matter. You're buying off Amazon, right? So through their ad, they'll always try to give that kind of communication to you. So you will find social proof happening from the sari guy to the real estate broker to the kids to parents sometimes, right? Are doing it. Parents are doing it to their kids by saying, "Sabko mark mil raha hai, tumhe hi mark nahi mil raha hai," right? They'll try to do that. Oh, look at your cousin, look at that cousin. Again, they'll try to use social proof, right, on you. So it is crazy how these principles are used. Like I said, you need to start doing them consistently and consciously, and very often in a business setting, for you to see the results of it. Right now, testimonials on websites. Why do all of them want testimonials? Because today, if you have to buy a product of the internet, more often than not, you are looking for some of these testimonials that people will give you, because you think, okay, if everybody is liking it, maybe it's good. Rest Okay, so these reviews by other people, again, a very important way in which people decide whether to buy something of Amazon or not, right, based on the reviews that are there. Restaurants and nightclubs do this so often, right? So they're trying to kick in both the principle of social proof and of scarcity, where if you find that outside a certain restaurant there are lots of people there standing, and there's a queue, you're like, man, we need to go to this restaurant, it must be really good, everybody is going there. And the minute that happens, you tend to do that as well, right? So how to use it, of course, I've discussed lots of these things. Use this principle to influence a person's decision by informing them that many other individuals are or have been complying with this. Share profiles similar to the person, use testimonial, if the person holds high respect for somebody who has been your customer or has used your product, mention it. Like, this is literally something that we do all the time in when we're selling to corporates, right? The if I'm going and trying to work with a certain bank, and if my the salespeople tell the people from that bank saying that, hey, we work, and we genuinely work better works with every major bank in India, right? We are one of their largest learning partners. So we do a lot of work with Citibank, we do a lot of work with HDFC Bank, with IndusInd Bank, we've done work for Yes Bank, we've done work for IndusInd. I could go on, like almost all the banks that are there. And the minute that new bank hears that we've done work for all the banks, they're like, okay, you know what, these guys seem to be good, they really know their stuff because they've worked with so many banks. And then we say, okay, you know what, we can give you references of the people within that bank. So all of a sudden now they want to take our proposition a lot more seriously, because they feel if everybody is doing it, it must be something that we need to do as well, right? Talk about how popular the product is and how many customers have gone for it, right? So these are all the things that you can do um, to kick in the principle of social proof. Yes, Arunima Kamat, any questions here?
No.
Mm, okay, so how has the principle of social proof worked on you in the past? Pause the video. Any three examples here? How can you use this principle in your personal or professional life? Again, pause the video, write down your three examples of how you can start using this in your life, and take this and talk to your coach about it. Now, the fifth principle that we're going to talk about is the principle of scarcity. Right now, what does this principle mean? When people perceive something is in short supply or scarce, they will want it more. This explains why limited time and limited quantity offers work so well, right? It's simple, that they work so well, because the human tendency is that anything that we think is scarce, we want it more. And it's so ingrained in the way we are. So it's not something that even happens to us as adults. I can tell you, with most kids that I've interacted with, my own kid and even my cousins and kids in my family. Now I have this kind of glass case in front of me, right? Which doesn't mean anything to a kid. But if my son comes and if I just say to him, hey, this is mine, if I just say that, right, all of a sudden he finds it scarce and he comes and he says, no, no, it's mine. He doesn't even know what it is. But the minute I say this is mine, he thinks it's scarce and his instinct kicks in and he wants it from me, right? And most adults operate in the same way. Now, of course, all salespeople and marketing campaigns, they always have this limited time and limited quantity offers, right? It's ingrained in the way their entire process works. So even at work better, when we're selling to corporates or even individuals, for those of you all who have bought the course, at different points of time, we would have different discounts running for very limited time, saying, okay, this is a discount that we have only for a day or a week or a certain time, right? And we try to adhere by that. But that is something of an attraction to our customers, saying, I need to get this discount. I don't want to lose out on this discount that I'm getting. Again, our legendary sari salesperson has used this with you a trillion times, right? So how does he use it with you? He'll say, मैडम ये एक ही पीस बचा है या दो ही पीस बचे हैं और पीस ही नहीं है, right? That's what he'll say there's only one or two pieces that are left of this sari, ma'am. There are no more pieces left, everything is sold out. So again, you feel, oh god, this is scarce. And the thing that you'd say to him is, no, 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 just keep it aside for me. Right now, all of a sudden that piece has become super valuable for you. Please keep it aside. I want dibs on it, in a way, right? Please do that. And that's how you'll end up reacting. And very often, if you just want to pull a fast one on that sari salesman, if he says, no, only two pieces are left, ma'am, so you know what you say to him? Oh, that's so unfortunate. Actually, I wanted 30 of this same sari. I want 30 pieces and I want to give it to all my family members. The next thing that he'll say, yeah, I'll be able to make them. Ban jayenge, kyun nahi? Right? So from saying that only one or two is left, if you tell them you need 30, he'll say, yeah, I'll make it for you. So it's not scarce anymore because you said you needed 30, right? Because of course he's using the principle of influence with you. The real estate broker will do the same thing, right? He'll say, this trick has been played on me so many times and I've fallen for it so many times. If a real estate broker comes and shows you a certain apartment to rent out or buy, and he sees in your body language that you really like it, the first thing that he'll say to you, sir, you should close on this apartment really soon. You know why? Because there are two other offers that are there on this apartment, right? It's very much in demand, and very often he'll act like he's got a call right there, and he'll say, just 1 minute, huh? And then he'll go to the side, do a call, and come back and say, one more customer wanted the same apartment, 3 bedroom, exactly here. So anyway, if you liked it, decide fast, right? So what he'll do with you is he'll do both things. He'll do social proof, the real estate broker, by saying, oh, all Kamats are buying here, and on the other side he will do scarcity with you, right? So scarcity, he'll say, oh, but only it's left and it may go at any point of time, so please book it immediately. And both these things like work on you like magic. Social proof, one of the examples that I forgot to give there, but a car salesman used both these principles on me, right? So I was going to buy a car, and so that car salesman asked me, saying, and uh, so I don't want to say what car it is, but I went to buy a car, and he said, oh, so like, what do you do? So I said, oh, I run a training company. He said, what kind of a training company do you run? So I run an executive training company. He said, oh, that last week we sold this same car to another CEO that ran a similar company like yours, right? Now, the minute he said that, that put tremendous pressure on me to buy that car. And then immediately he said, oh, but you also, I have to tell you that, this model at this price is going out of stock by next week, right? So if you like it, you need to kind of buy it immediately. So back to back, he used like two principles of influence. He did social proof, and then immediately he did scarcity on me. And sure as hell, I fell for it and I bought the car, right? So that's how well it works. Um, because things, why does it work? Because things that are difficult to attain are typically more valuable, and the availability of an item experience can serve as a shortcut cue for its quality. As things become less accessible, we lose freedom. We respond to the loss of freedom by wanting to have them more than before, right? These are the reasons why we want it. Now, you've seen this happening all the time, right? Now, look at this sale, 70% off, 48 hours remaining. Hurry up, limited seats available. Everybody is doing this with you all the time. Um, Create a sense of urge. How to use it? Create a sense of urgency by limited number technique. For example, Make My Trip will tell you that there are only few spots left when you look for rooms and flights. If you don't buy it in that moment, you risk the chance of losing it, right? So you go on Make My Trip or Clear Trip or any of these things. If you have the ticket there, they'll often have this thing which says 5 seats remaining, right? Or if it's a hotel room, they'll have 3 seats remaining, three rooms available in this hotel or something like that. The other thing that they will have is they'll have something which says 99 people bought this thing today, right? So this is again social proof that they're trying to do here. They're trying to do scarcity on you, right? So this is something which is constantly done. And the deadline technique, for example, a message from your favorite brand saying end of season sale ends in 2 days, and then we end up buying stuff that we don't want, right? The amount of sales that Amazon has, festival, my God, festival sale, Diwali sale, Ganesh Chaturthi sale, end of year sale, and all of us almost end up buying. I know I do it myself on Mintra. We end up buying stuff that we don't want because you're like, oh, the price is so low, let me buy this, and it's just there for 2 more days. And after 2 more days, when you go to that site, more or less that same TV, shoe, whatever is there at almost that same price, right? But it's such a compelling thing for us because we don't want to lose that discount. So we buy things we don't even need. Yes, Arunima.
I put the end of season sale because that's the one I most frequently fall for
Yeah,
every
yeah,
single time.
yeah,
And although I'm aware of this technique, I still
yeah,
fall for it because again that instinct kicks in that, oh, I'm going to lose this and I may not get.
yeah,
I don't even need it, but yeah, that thought comes in that what if it's not there and then I want it
yeah.
at a later time, so I'll just get it.
Listen,
And then yeah, you.
I have been to the sari shops so much, and I've seen how all of a sudden when the person says "ye ek hi piece hai," to my cousin sisters, that sari becomes all important because all of a sudden it's scarce, right? So it's crazy how that these principles influence at us at our very core, right? So
Correct.
so that's what they end up doing, and that's why they're so effective. So again, how has the principle of scarcity worked on you in the past? How can you use this principle in your personal and professional life? Three examples each. Pause the video here and then take them to your live coaching session. Now, the last principle is, of course, the principle of liking, right? The more your stakeholder likes you, the easier it is to persuade them. People are far more likely to say yes to those they know and like. What this means simply is that tomorrow, if an odd credit card salesman calls you that you have no connection with, it's so much more easier for you to say no to them than to say no to somebody that you like and somebody that you're close to, right? It's that simple. Fathers often have such a hard time saying no to their daughters because they like them a lot, right? And it becomes so difficult for us to say no to our loved ones, our people that are really close to us, again because of the principle of liking, that we can't say no to them. Now, a golden rule on liking is, people we like people that are like us, so it's that easy, right? We like people that are like us. So that's why when you're interacting with people, try to find commonality with people, and the more common things that you find with people, the more you will get to talk, the more there a liking and rapport will develop between people, and it's quite easier actually to find things in common that you like, right? So if you're a parent and somebody else is a parent, that's enough of similarity for you to talk and bond on. In a country like India, there are so many things that are so common that we know most people like cricket, movies, so on and so forth, but you can always find those commonalities with people. And the minute you find something common, um, you tend to like that person, right? So if any one of y'all have in a way uh, been abroad for a long period of time, or worked abroad or lived abroad for a while, at least that happens to me. If I'm outside of the country, and if I'm in the tube or if I'm in the train, and if I hear somebody else speaking Hindi, I look at that person like he's my long lost brother, right? And I've been out of India only for 7 days. It's not like I've been out of India for a long time, but automatically I look at him and I'm like, oh, long lost brother, I want to go talk to him, right? Because he's like me. So automatically I like him and I want to talk to him versus talking to somebody else. When I'm on slightly probably longer trips abroad, it doesn't matter. Then I could talk to a if somebody looks like me, right? So, and he's not an Indian, but he's from Bangladesh or even Pakistan or wherever, but he looks like he's from the Indian subcontinent. That's enough of a reason for me to bond with that person, right? Because again, we have something in common. We come from the same geography. So people that are like us, we tend to like them, and it's far more difficult for us to say no to them, right? So in contexts of business, it's very important for you to build rapport, build good relationships with your clients and different stakeholders, because if you want to influence them, that in the end will come to use, right? We also tend to like people that compliment us. It's just natural for us that we tend to like people that compliment us, and more often than not, most people are pretty good at telling a fake compliment, but there's some research that shows that even if the person knows it's a fake compliment, they like it in a way, right? Even if they know that it's fake, but don't give fake compliments. If you observe people enough, there's lots of things to compliment them about which are not fake. And we like people who cooperate with us on our mutual goals, right? So if somebody is working with us to achieve something for him and us, that is something that those are people that we like, right? So you'll often kind of find again the sari salesman that is If he's good at his job, he's very charming, right? He'll have a smile on his face when he's talking to you. He'll be very nice to you when he's talking to you, and that's very important. That politeness often leads to you liking that person, and he'll do all those things that builds that kind of bond with you, and then it's so difficult for you to leave the shop without buying something from him, right? The same thing a waiter would do, if he's smart, right? That he'll have a smile on his face when he starts the interaction with you, and he'll just generally treat you well. And when he treats you well, the principle of reciprocity kicks in, and you also tend to like that person. So both these things happen automatically, right? So we said create similarity, understand the person's interests, find common ground, mirror the person's body language and tone of voice. So what mirroring basically is a very detailed concept, but what if you're similar in your body language, if you're similar, if a person is talking in a soft tone of voice and you're busy talking in a really loud tone of voice or volume, that's not very good, right? If a person speaks in a soft kind of volume and you speak also in a soft volume, he's likely to connect with you a lot more than there being a big disparity or difference between the volumes at which you speak, right? So mirroring is about that. If a person speaks very slowly and you speak very fast, that's not really mirroring him, right? So you don't need to talk exactly like him or as slow as him, but somewhere in the same territory as him, and then you'll connect with that person a lot more, right? Then of course take genuine interest in a person, you listen attentively, kind of do that small talk that we spoke about, where you make conversation with people, know how to make conversation with people. That'll get them to like you in some way, compliment with caution, and create a sense of trust. Educate them in situations where they are proactively making a wrong decisions. You will establish trustworthiness, right? So that's what you're supposed to do. Now, the principle of liking also comes in business settings. The principle of liking, if you ask me, the first and most important thing to do in business settings or even personal settings is smile, right? So that's what, the more that you smile at people and genuinely practice smiling, make smiling your default expression, like we discussed in the body language class, that's something that makes that will kind of promote liking. And if you're frowny all the time, people don't tend to like you that much, right? So yeah, that's a principle that works. Be somebody that's easy to be around. Don't be somebody that's tough to be around. And how can you be easy to be around? Don't complain about everything, right? Don't be fixated on really small things. Don't try to find your way of doing stuff in everything, right? Try to build consensus or mold consensus of an audience, and try, not to be difficult in situations. And if you do that, you are going to be liking. So the principle of liking and reciprocity are very closely connected with each other as well, right? So the more reciprocity you do, the more people will also tend to like you. Earlier, I passed a comment where I said that the principle of authority and liking are often at odds with each other, because often they are at odds with each other, right? Because if I'm going to a counter of a hotel and if I want my work done quickly, I can either get them to like me, and for which I'm going to have to like really smile and really be sweet to them and see whether that works. But sometimes when you do that, people take you for granted, or you have to go to the other way. You're slightly more somber, and you come across as serious and in turn an authority, and then they take you seriously. And a lot of times, like we've seen people mix and match a lot of these principles, right? If you are an accomplished doctor, and you have a reputation, so you have the principle of authority going for you because you're an accomplished doctor, and when the patient comes to you, then you're really nice to that patient, right? Which kicks in the principle of liking. You're likely to do anything that that doctor tells you because they've mixed authority which comes from their reputation, and they've been nice to you, so the principle of liking kicks in. And the minute these two work together, it's almost magical kind of effect that happens with them, right? So in the hotel context, what I tend to do is I first go in, because I've seen more often than not, more than liking, the principle of authority works, where I'm firm with them when I speak. I want them to do their stuff quickly, and the minute they've done their stuff, then I be very sweet to them, right? And I'm like, oh, thank you very much, and I'll be really nice, and I'll kind of throw a few compliments at them as to how they did a good job. And then I mix authority with liking, and then my stay over the next few days, they're very, very good at dealing with me, right? So these two things mixed well, given on the situation and circumstance, also kind of works well, right? So this is the principle of liking. How has the principle of liking worked on you in the past? How can you use this principle in your personal and professional life, right? The one kind of advertising technique that is used on us, if you remember the Vodafone pug, that dog, right? The Vodafone dog. He was such a likable figure. It was such a likable ad that you kind of then you like the brand connected to it, and then you'd want to buy more from that brand. And that Vodafone pug had such a big impact on Vodafone's brand and sales, right? Often children are used in advertisements, because children inherently are more likable. So the minute you use those children, kind of there's a warmness that comes to that brand, and people kind of connect with that brand. So marketeers again are using these techniques with you to create that warm fuzzy feeling of liking in you, right? So of course, three examples of how this has worked with you in the past. One example, if you're a parent, is when your child speaks to you in a very sweet tone of voice. It's almost impossible for you to say no. At least it is for me, and that's the principle of liking setting in again, right? When you do that. So how has this worked on you, and how can you use this principle with other people? Okay. Yes, Arunima Kamat. Any questions? Any examples? Any comments on this?
No, I think this principle actually happens to be one of my most used principles,
Yeah.
especially with stakeholders who are difficult to get along with.
Yeah.
So it's something I use because I find that it's very easy for me to get on someone's good side,
Yeah.
and whether again, so with whether it's giving compliments or just being a likable person or trying to be nice and trying to be kind,
Yeah.
and then it's helped me out literally in so many situations where the same stakeholder has not relented for another team member,
Yeah.
but have extended my deadlines and
Correct.
has been very never lost their cool at me because they have a liking towards me, and it's
Correct.
always worked to my advantage.
Correct.
So like I said, this is one of my most utilized principles.
Correct. And again, I like this principle because this is a principle that again creates good relationships between people.
Correct.
Um, and like I said, if you use any one of these principles in a manipulative way, it's not the right thing to do, right? You don't want to use any of these things in manipulative ways. You want to,
Correct.
but people often forget how important persuasion and influence is. If I am a part of a company and I feel really passionately about a project, and I know that project is good for my company, I will still have to take a lot of effort to convince, influence, and persuade people. Just because I know the
Correct.
project is good doesn't mean that everybody in the system is going to think it's good. So then it's your ability to communicate well, persuade people, influence people, that's going to matter. So the good project will happen depending on this skill of yours or not. And it's very often not on the merit of the project. The merit of the project is
Correct.
there, but all these abilities become so important, right? I think it's tomorrow, if somebody needs to convince and influence their child towards doing something, um however good that thing is, you'll still have to, you'll still have to take the effort to influence your child to do that certain thing, because at that point of time they may not realize the importance of it. Again, your
Correct.
ability to influence and persuade is going to come into play. So in just so many of these situations, people think that, oh, if something is good, the company should accept it, right? Do you know, when we are talking, Arunima, to our salespeople, and even the salespeople that sell this product, right, that talk to customers and sell this product, the one thing that I always tell them is that communication skills is ultra important to every person's life. And this
Correct.
program that we're doing is a one of a kind program in India and possibly on the planet, right? Where we're doing one on one communication coaching. And we know from our experience that the best way to get better is through this one on one coaching, right? And of course, you need to take the effort to do stuff, but this one on one coaching will really help. So when I tell my salespeople, I tell them, listen, follow up with your clients, because they may not know how good this product is. They may
Correct.
not realize how helpful this product is, and it is your job to influence, persuade, and convince them to buy the product, because once they do it, they're going to thank you for it later. When we've trained insurance people for years, our companies train people from the banking, financial, and insurance sector, right? So I often tell those insurance agents saying that, listen, get good at influencing and persuading people. And why should you do it? Because somebody may not want to buy that influence, because if not somebody may not want to buy that insurance, because if nothing goes wrong, people don't realize the importance of that insurance. But boy, will
Correct.
they realize the importance when something goes wrong, somebody dies, an accident happens, you need to go to the hospital. Then they will thank you for it, right? They won't thank you for it in the other years where nobody's needed that insurance, right? And that's your job. That's why you need to get good at influence and persuasion. So whether I'm talking to my sales team, whether I'm talking to the sales team at our clients ends, this is what we tell them, that this
Correct.
is no manipulation. You need to do it because your customer may not know the importance of it, because your customer is not the expert at that, right? You need to know
Right.
the need and convince them accordingly. So influence, persuasion, convincing has a very noble aspect to it, that most people forget, right? So if you're a politician who's got great intentions for the state, the city, or the country, and if you can't influence voters to vote for you, what's the use of your good intention policies? There's no use of your good intention policies if you're not going to come in power and can't implement them, right? Again, persuasion,
Correct.
influence is going to become so important. And we could go through each one of these principles and talk about how politicians use them on us, right? They're using
Right.
this on us all the time through different things, right? And yeah, these are super important ones. So we're going to end this session with this. This is the time where you look at your notepad and make a note of at least, I'm sure you have lots of takeaways from this session, but make a note of 3 to 5 takeaways that you have from the session. You know the drill by now. Ensure that you take those 5 takeaways and have a discussion with your coach on these principles, and you can ask whatever questions that you have. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have enjoyed this session and learned a lot about the subject of influence and persuasion. For me, I can tell you that learning about these 6 principles was an eye opener. Was an eye opener. I would use a lot of these principles, like I said, naturally myself, but learning all 6 of them and their application helped me so much as an entrepreneur, helped me so much as a speaker, facilitator, and that's why I love teaching this topic. Arunima, in the learning resources, also give our students a lot of learning resources, a lot of reading material around these 6 principles, right?
Sure.
Which is there. So that's something that would help them as well. Thank you very much. I hope you have a good time. Until next time, bye bye. See you.